Neil, thank you again for joining us. I have a little interesting synchronicity story to introduce you with. You know how your phone will pop up and say, here's memories from this day in years past. So I don't always scroll through them, maybe like once a month or something like that. And I did it this week, and it was a photo of a beach setting with a book on a table that I was reading, and it was your book. And so just like, wow, how amazing that it was almost like to the day of this presentation. So
Well,
anyway, thank you for joining us. I'll let you introduce yourself and let you take it from there.
thank you very, very much, David. It's really good to be with you and everybody today. I've been looking around the screen. I've just spent the last three-quarters of an hour with Tim, who's on the screen now. So I'm doing the rounds of California today.
Yay!
Yesterday, I spent a lot of time in New York. So I was talking with principals and school leaders in New York yesterday. So I think I've been more in America than I have been in my own home, which is here in England. So it's great. Um, I was telling Tim earlier that, and David, I just told that one of my granddaughters got married only a few days ago. She got married um, in at near Illinois University at Champaign, near Chicago. And she's married an American guy who was a baseball player at university, and they're very excited. I couldn't get over the fact when she spoke, she's totally lost her British accent and has the most incredibly exquisite, delightful American accent. So she really fits in at that university. Um, my sister-in-law, Lisa, she is living at the moment looking after her mum uh, down in Central America. And so I know a lot of folk in America. I've got lots of friends all over the place there. So I feel really I'm amongst the family speaking to you all today. So I hope you also, when David asked me, I thought, well, I'm not going to produce a presentation with lots of slides and things like that. Uh, I thought with you, I would just speak from my heart. And so I don't know where we're going to go, um, but I'll try. As I've said, I'm by birth British, although I don't feel that. I feel universal. I spend a lot of my life in in lots of countries. 2 weekends ago, I was in Iceland. A few weeks before that, I was in New Zealand, and I've been in New Zealand more this year than anywhere else, and Australia too. So I like to think of myself as a global person rather than a particular nationality, as I always worry about extremes of nationalism anyway. Um, I think one of my things I talk about is that we need a new ethic in the world, which is universal, where we all see each other. Yes, we all have places we come from where we are proud of them, and rightly so. We have our football teams that we're proud of, but not to be in excess of that sort of thing. So, my name's Neil Hawkes. By training, I'm an educator, um, and I'll tell you a little bit about that story, I think, before I start. Um, if I go back to my early life, my parents moved around a lot, and so I went to various schools, and they were quite challenging, I've got to admit. I left school without too many qualifications at the age of 16, and I had all sorts of things I aspired to at that time. But I had a growing interest in children and children's development. And my cousin, who was a teacher, said, Neil, I've seen you talking with children. You'd be a great teacher. And I said, yeah, I really enjoyed talking with children. So I trained to be a teacher after I passed the necessary qualifications to get into what was then called a training college. But then life took off for me. It really did. I really, really enjoyed learning about education and the great philosophers of education, the history of education, um, the psychology of education. In those days, being a teacher was quite a long course. It was 3 years with lots of practical teaching practice. So I had to learn the art of being a teacher, which I'm grateful for. But what I am so proud about is that I had incredible mentors, some really inspirational people who helped me. I've often said that I stand on the shoulders of giants. I'm not one of them. I just stand on these shoulders, these wonderful people that have been given to me over my lifetime to learn from. So I've used those. So I then became in the British system what we call a head teacher. You call it a principal of a school at the age of 27. I then went on after a few years to be the head of a really large school in the UK. I then was told, well, you're still only 36, Neil. You need to do something else. So I became an advisor, chief officer of
I just
500
got another
schools.
order, so let me just package this up real quick.
Was that someone wanting to speak to me?
No, I took care of it. It's all good.
Thank you. So yeah, I was looking after lots of schools and I was doing a lot of school visits and I was noticing in schools that somehow atmospheres in schools were changing and I was watching pupil behavior and I thought things are really changing. The the young people don't seem to uh, have some of those sort of qualities which we relate to respect and tolerance and cooperation and all those sort of qualities that are, I believe, in us as people, but the children were not showing them. And so I started to think quite deeply about this. And I talked to a lot of people, and they say, yeah, we're noticing this decline that was going on in the British system. So I then came up with the notion. I thought, what would happen if we gave the children access to a vocabulary, words? I said they get a mathematical language, they get a language if they're studying a foreign language, they have a language for science, all these languages they're developing, but no one's giving them an ethical language. So I thought, what would happen if I went and returned to be the principal of a school in an urban area with ordinary kids? What could we do if we gave these children access to this vocabulary? And so I looked in the media and found a school, and it was in a suburb of Oxford called West Kidlington, just an ordinary suburb, blue collar workers in the area. It was ideal, and especially as the school had just burned down. It had caught alight. No one knows quite how, but it had burned down. And so they were looking for someone who would help grow this school. They were going to invest in a new building. The teachers were really upset because their things had been burned. But I said, yes, this is a challenge. I will come here. And the school community embraced me. I said, well, I gave them some conditions of me coming because they was quite surprised that because of my background, I wanted to be a principal again. But I took over this school. Now, the crucial thing is that I thought, well, there's no good in running this experiment unless I link with a university. So I got in touch with Oxford University and I talked to someone called Professor Richard Pring, and who's a well-known moral philosopher. Sadly, he died a few weeks ago. I'm very sad about that. But Richard became a great friend of mine, And we ran a research program over 7 years to see just what effects there would be on children, the school, and the community. And this talk is really about community and how we grow community. What effect that would have on the community. And so we did all this stuff. We introduced the children. We first of all went to the community. We said, look, we're thinking of introducing the children to good human dispositions, which we call values. But what are the values that you in your community really appreciate? Because we would like to build on that. And so we had a forum, and we were overwhelmed with the parents and community people who came. And we sat them down on tables, and they had quite arguments really about, yeah, I believe this value is important. Someone else would say, no, surely we should think of this one. And in the end, we collated what their thoughts were, and we whittled them down because many people said the same value. So we came up with 22 human values, which this community thought were important. Now, as a by thing, I've done that process in many, many schools worldwide. And it's fascinating to me that a group of human beings will always come up with a very similar list. It's not totally different. So I want to make that point. But it's important that you always ask the community. Some schools and institutions and big companies, I work with some very big companies, and they say, these are our values. And they put them on laminated paper. And I go in and say, yes, they're laminated values. They're not values that are really being lived. Because I talk to middle management and they say, yeah, the top management want these values, but Dr. Hawkes, they don't live them. You know, it's awful. We don't even know what the values are of our leaders. So it's interesting. So going through that forum process is really important in a company, a business, and in your family too. Those of you who are parents, grandparents, have you been through that process? Have you talked as a family about what are the values that guide our thinking and behavior? Because that's what a value is. A value is a principle that guides our thinking and behavior. It's a fundamental belief that we have about what's important to us in life. And so we started then introducing the children to this language. Explicitly, we did it through a lesson a week. Perhaps we took the word respect. Now, in the British system, we have things called assemblies, where the whole school or a large part of the school meets together so that you can talk about things of importance. I know not all systems have that in the world. So we would introduce the children together, and I would tell stories, we would illustrate what the value means. And then we did something that in those days was quite unique, quite different. And that was during that time of talking about the value, we would give children time for inner quiet reflection. So we say, you've heard this story. Now go inside and ask yourself, what does this mean to me? How should I use what I've learned through this lesson today in my life? So what we were doing, we were helping the children to think at depth, to actually engage with the information so that they would then put it into action in their lives. Because, my dear friends, so many people talk about good values, but it's not talking about them, it's actually living them that's really important. And so the children learned reflective practice, which now, of course, is called mindfulness. We didn't call it mindfulness then, we called it reflection or silent sitting. And we took it into the classrooms too. And we had something called brain breaks. Can I encourage you to have brain breaks in your lives? It's a moment where you can set your phone or your iPhone, you can set it for an hour or 2 hours. And when it pings or rings, you just become still. You're still. and you go inside and you calm down and you then say, well, what's going on inside me now? What's going on with my thoughts? What parts of me are saying something to me at the moment? Are they interfering with my day? Those sort of questions then settle down. And then when you return to whatever you're doing, you feel more awake, more conscious. Some of you I know are concerned about mental health. Mental health is the biggest issue in the United Kingdom, and I suspect it is in your country too. You've only got to watch the national news for half an hour and you're having a nervous breakdown. I don't want to go on today about that, but it's really worrying in so many ways. But by actually taking control of yourself and saying, yeah, who's this really nice person inside me? Who's the authentic me? Can I encourage that authentic me to be in control of the situation? So not using that language, but that's what we were enabling the children to do. So they were learning a vocabulary, they were having reflective times. And then at the end of 7 years, we looked to see what was happening. And the research absolutely blew my mind. It was absolutely incredible. I did not expect to have the positive outcome that the research showed. It was so positive that Professor Terence Lovett from Australia, from Newcastle University in Australia, they were introducing values education into Australia, and he came to see what we were doing. And he said, Neil, you're going to be the gold standard in Australia. We will use your work in Australia, because he was so impressed. So what were the things that were happening? Now, number one, the biggest effect initially was on the adults in this school, not just the teachers, the teaching assistants, the admin staff, everybody. The effect was on them because they were learning the language of values. Because besides teaching the values explicitly, we were also teaching it implicitly. So when someone came into the room from the playing outside, you say, well done, you were cooperating really well, or what respect you showed. So the staff were using the language. And again, if you're a parent or a grandparent, use that language when you're talking to young people in a positive way. It's an unshaming language. I'm very critical of school systems worldwide because so many of them shame human beings. So many of the problems in the world is because we've got adults now who have been shamed in a school system. We need to stop that. So a values-based environment helps you to stop that. So the adults said, oh, we don't have to fight with the children anymore. We have a relationship with them. Our teaching has improved because the behavior is good and we get on with the lessons. And we're creating what we called a calm, purposeful environment. And so that was number one. Number two, referring to the pupils, pupil behavior, wow, it was incredible. Now, let me remind you that these are ordinary kids. They're kids with ADHD, autism, all the whole range of neurodiversity. So it was having an effect on all the children. Obviously, some extremes of behavior, and we were having to cope with support mechanisms. But generally speaking, the children's behavior was good. Why? Because they felt ownership of what was going on. We gave them a holistic education that was very much for their needs, and they were finding ownership and agency. They were using the vocabulary of values to be courageous advocates. The children would write to members of parliament and say, why are you doing this in parliament? We want to know the reasons. So these children were critically aware. Forgive me if you're from Texas, because I understand that Texas doesn't allow critical awareness for some reason. So these children were awake. Now, my great message that really comes out of this is that we need on this planet to raise consciousness, to be more awake as human beings, so we're not manipulated by systems or people who fill power vacuums. Whenever there is fear in a population, that allows the space to be filled by extremes, whether they be political extremes, religious extremes, social extremes. Those extremes will always, because the human being, because we are based on 30,000 years of development, we look for safety. And these voices appear to give us safety, but it's disastrous, as we know. So consciousness improves. The human being suddenly becomes more aware of who they are and what they are engaged with. So that was another result. So behavior. Now, the third thing is really important because some of the people who say, Neil, yeah, you want to make people nice people, but what about academic work? Well, I can tell you that we were the top of the league tables for academic work, and we didn't teach any booster classes or anything else. Why? Because the children were actually engaged with their learning. They wanted to learn, and therefore, again, that word agency, they really got on. So amazing results on that. The atmosphere, you see, of the school was this calm and purposeful, and what it enabled everyone to do was get on with the job of learning, which schools should actually be about. But most schools spend their time on behavior issues and sorting out problems like that rather than on learning, which is amazing, really. So those are some of the results that we found. And that this work now is in thousands of schools worldwide. Sad to say, not in many American schools. I've never found that America has been open to this. It's partly your system, which is full of inhibitors. Who has autonomy in a school? Unlike the British system, the school principal doesn't have the autonomy that principals do in other parts of the world. So that's one of the reasons I think, but I might be wrong. You'll be able to put me right and say, no, you've got it all wrong. But I have got hope. And when I was speaking yesterday, as I said, I was speaking in New York yesterday. I'm hopeful that we can engage with holistic values-based education, perhaps across the whole district. If you're influential in the school systems, then do get in touch with me. I'd love to see a pilot.
Is Neil breaking up for others as well? Okay, yeah. So Neil, maybe this is a good natural time for pause to allow your computer to catch up to us. But some of the group that I know here, so there's definitely people from the U.S. Values Alliance, but there's also people that I met through ULab, Otto Scharmer's program out of MIT, and we had a hub called Reimagining Education. So I think you've got a lot of allies that want to see more of what you're talking about in the US. And maybe now would be a good time for some questions and interactivity if that works for you, or and let's see if your computer is yeah, it's still I think a little frozen. Um Maybe one
Yeah,
option is to exit and come back
you good
in,
over
see if that
there?
I would suggest trying exiting and coming right back into the Zoom and see if that improves it. In the meantime, I will perform a song for everyone to keep everybody entertained. So,
To me, it's also really just notable how it started breaking up right as he was discussing bringing this to America. Like almost, it's like bring this to America, but there's been resistance. Maybe and then all of a sudden it's like garbled. We can't hear Neil anymore.
right, yeah.
There are forces in America trying to keep out these beautiful values. So we're
Are
stronger than that. Yeah.
are you the one who did that? Did you start?
I
Taking
blame
it-
Texas. I blame Texas.
Okay, yeah. You see someone dialing in from Texas. All right, let's try again, Neil. See how it goes. No, still frozen. So
Times turning off the camera allows a little more bandwidth to come through.
true, but I want to see him though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, maybe what I'll do is remove you so you have to come back in. See if that works.
That's a good idea, I think.
Yeah.
Come back in.
Yeah,
Go away and come back.
Let's.
yeah.
We'll miss you, but go away.
Yeah. All right, I tried that. I've never had to kick out the speaker before for bad behavior, but maybe in the meantime, I'll make a little plug. So Laura and I are hosting a book club. I can't remember the date right off the top of my head, but it's in about 2 weeks. It's a values-based book club. We're going to meet about once a month or so, and we're reading Maria. Is it Resi or Ressa? I got it wrong before. So Laura, you can help me out.
Yeah, I'll put the information,
That'd be great.
date and everything in the chat for
That would
everyone.
be lovely. Yeah, it's I can't remember the exact title. Man, I'm so unprepared. How to Fight a Dictator. She managed several CNN international offices, but a really interesting life story. And she grew up in the Philippines and talks about her experience with both dictators that had to, be taken out of office there, and a lot mentioned the word values many, many times throughout the book. So if you're and just a great writer too, really a terrific writer. So, all right, I'm gonna quickly check my email. Eben or Darby or Lizette, anything you want to promote about the U.S. Values Alliance while we're getting Neil?
All good.
I wonder if kicking someone out means they can't come back. Guess we're gonna find out today.
Yeah.
Just to open up the thing on the participants list that says invite and put in his email address and he'll be able to come back.
Ah, thank you, Rhonda.
You're welcome.
Well, we've
So,
got another speaker, but that's in October. So you've got a great lineup of speakers coming up for the U.S. Values Alliance, David. This is wonderful if we can get Neil back.
we're gonna get Neil back. Uh, well, let's pause the recording.
Her whole point, her whole point was on ethics. Obviously, that's her baseline. But she said the problem in teaching ethics over the years is it was things for people to memorize and to know the structures of ethics, but not to actually feel it and to live it. And she said that's where we had a shift, the teaching of values. So it's very interesting what Neil's presenting in that mindset too, that changed the curriculum that Mary Gentile did, across universities and institutions. And she said now she's getting a lot for the corporations to understand, but it's kind of consumerizing the value structure. How do you live it? How do you do it? You don't just recite it. So it's we tend to forget that in society.
Thank you, Darby. And I'm curious, we have a lot of educators here. Are people seeing anything like this across the country? Or anything close to it?
Well,
Yes.
I'll just
And
say,
how about you then, Chuck?
yeah, well, Chuck, I may have the same things, right? But no, Chuck's got some good ones. But the bottom line for me is there are many, many organizations, not necessarily specifically values, but really about educating the human being. So really honoring the fact that there is a unique contribution in this human being that's being educated, and then go in really in that direction. So Education Reimagined is one. It has 176 schools that it's an umbrella for. And all of them pretty much have like a 5-minute video that'll tell you about it. So they're oriented in that way, but not like as specifically as what Neil's talking about. So I'll turn it over to Chuck. Thanks.
And it's nice to see so many familiar faces here. And many of you have heard me talk in the past about Springhouse, an intergenerational learning community in Floyd, Virginia, that focuses on vitality, which is kind of their shorthand for wholeness and agency. So I was interested that Neil mentioned that fundamental of agency. I also, just a question for everyone, was he saying that he thought that the United States principals had more autonomy? No, he wasn't saying that, was he? No.
I think that's what he was saying.
No, he was
Oh,
saying
he's saying less autonomy, less
Yeah.
autonomy.
Yeah. That's my experience.
I've got it backwards. I heard him say that they had more autonomy. I don't know.
So I'm going to do something unusual. Neil isn't able to get in. I'm going to close the Zoom and restart it. And if everyone wouldn't mind rejoining, I'd appreciate it. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
Bye.
you, David. Thank you.